I have a guest commentator with me for the rest of the program who will be giving his thoughts on the news and issues of the day. And he is the current affairs analyst and professor of communications at Baze University in Abuja, Professor Abiodun Adeniyi. Good to see you, Prof. It's been a while. I think you were moving around the place, but it's good to have you back on the seat that you're so familiar with.
I've been all ears.
Well, I mean, the SDP, just looking at the what we had on the program today, our first guest, the SDP presidential candidate, Prince Adewale Adebayo, had giving his impression of the governorship election at the weekend, clearly wanting, like many in the country, for INEC to deliver unimpeachable, free and fair elections, but he is of the opinion that that didn't happen.
Yeah, I think he's not alone. We've had so many complaints around how the elections went. We've had from Dino Melaye and, of course, from the SDP governorship.
But those are all losers, aren't they? They're the people who ostensibly lost the elections. Yeah, and a lot of people would say, well, that's what happens. Nigerians don't like to accept loss.
The victorious governor was full of praises for INEC. You know, so it's like that. We'll hear different kinds of stories depending on the position of the one who is commenting. But what it just tells us is that we are here to get to our destination in terms of infusing integrity and credibility into the electoral process. I would just say that it's probably a work in progress, you know, but what we demand, what citizens are demanding is that INEC should move faster than it's probably moving in terms of delivering an election that will say that it's truly free, fair, and credible. Other than the contestants, or maybe the losers, like you said, we also had what civil society organizations said. Clement Nwankwo, for instance, is a largely credible commentator. He too wasn't too happy with the election. And that's why we keep saying that, you know, I've made the argument that what we seem to be having are simply political activities, you know, election activities, you know, and that is somewhat reflective of democracy, but the soul is still missing. The character of democracy is still missing. You know, it's not yet value-driven. It's not yet virtue-oriented. What we could say, the cardinal objectives of democracy, you know, are infused into the process. You know, that's what we need to work towards. And of course, in the build-up to the election, we probably may not be able to fault INEC at the level of preparations, at the level of communication, at the level of assurances, you know. And of course, you know, materials were rightly moved to the right places. Security was top-notch from what we had, deploying 40,000 men here and there. We had all that, you know, so we're expecting an election that will be free and fair. You know, but what happened to implementation? What happened at the time of delivery? My sense is that there were compromises here and there. Compromises, you know, that the average citizen will often fall for, you know, in a situation where it shouldn't happen. So what is that thing that is making citizens, you know, not to be above board, not to be speak and span, delivering on the mandate that they have been given, you know, often fall into the pressure tactics, suspectedly anyway, of politicians? What is that that gap that we need to fill? That's the thing that we probably need to focus our attention on as we try to develop or build our democracy.
Yeah, that's a good point. And let's turn to the chaos in the leadership ranks of APGA, also featuring prominently today in the program. I mean, it's got so many twists and turns that many Nigerians would be forgiven for finding it confusing and rather incoherent in terms of the narrative.
I'm sure you actually forgive me too, because it's quite really confusing, and I didn't really know.
I'm sorry, what's going on?
No, I actually found it very difficult to know.
Yeah, it's very difficult to follow.
Yeah, that APGA is in crisis, that they're having leadership crisis, you know. APGA for me is represented somewhat by Governor Chukwuma Soludo, you know, the governor of Anambra State, because they've controlled that state for a very long time, and people have come to commend the party on account of their ability to hold on to that state. And we have seen situations where parties hold on to one state. From there, they launch their interest, their tentacles to other states. This is a possibility. This is something that can happen. Remember the onslaught, you know, a little over a year ago when Valentine Ozigbo coming through the PDP almost clinched it. You know, but APGA stood strong. You know, so there's a potential for APGA to now know that they're enmeshed in leadership crisis, something that has been protracted from his description, is regrettable. But again, we shouldn't be too surprised because we have seen it happen in some other political parties, particularly the PDP. Remember in the Sheriff days, Modu Sheriff, where the court declared Sheriff as the party chairman, but then it was just it became rather a court chairman, and it didn't sit well. It wasn't in sync with the party hierarchy until they were able to organize themselves. They got the court to vacate that decision, and of course they found their groove again, or their steam again, and they bounced back somewhat, but again, you would not say that they are still, they aren't completely back yet, but they are not doing badly. But ABGA, well, we just hope that they will be able to resolve it. Internal democracy is very, very important. He said Nigeria's problem is the problem of our democracy is mainly internal democracy. It's one of our problems. It's not just mainly internal democracy. There are so many other things that we have. But his argument simply points to the fact that the political party, as a pillar of democracy, needs to be well organized, well structured. A succession system, has to be much more improved than we're presently witnessing it, because they're supposed to be the institutions around which the democratic experiment will revolve around. And if they keep finding themselves in crisis, of course, it leaves a lot to be desired. It shouldn't really be.
Well, it clearly weakens the party.
It weakens the system at the end of the day, because the leaders are supposed, eventual leaders that will come and rule or govern will emerge from these party institutions. And if it is fraught with, riddled with crisis, then of course, what moral high ground, can they stand on to say that, they've got the credibility and character to lead the rest of us?
Quite. Well, let's turn to a news item that was brought to our attention, which is a new job creation move by the Tinubu government, something to do with expatriate quotas and taxes. I mean, you're across it. Tell us about that.
Yeah. I read it and I was quite impressed. I think it falls into the argument we're making that government needs to be creative, ingenious about what they do, particularly raising revenue, faced with declining resources, the volatility in the oil sector, and of course the long trial and maybe failure in the desire, to expand our revenue base away from oil into mineral resources, steel development, and of course agriculture. Now, this seems to be, to me, a soft measure where expatriates are going to be much more involved beyond the personal income tax they are paying. They're going to be charged some other kinds of fees that is not clear yet. We are still to see it. But of course, those fees will be in addition to the tax that they are paying. And we have them aplenty, about over 150,000 of them across the country. And the projection is that if this is well executed within every year, the government should be able to raise about $1.5 billion. That's quite some good amount of money that could be very helpful if judiciously used at the end of the day, to ramping up our revenue base. And beyond that as well, it could also go a long way in increasing, reducing the unemployment rate in the country, the underemployment rate, such that the number of expatriates taking over jobs that Nigerians can do will probably reduce. Because not many of the expatriates will be interested in doing some of these and be interested in paying the fees, so on account of that, they might be discouraged from taking the jobs. Many jobs are there that they are occupying that Nigerians could probably also do, so it might discourage them, and of course creating spaces for Nigerians. Potentially. So and it is not just related to expatriates who are working in foreign companies. There are so many Nigerian-owned companies, using expatriates, to do their thing. All these sections will be affected across the construction company, the mining industry, the oil industry, and all of that. So I think it's a soft measure, helpful to the system in a situation where we're having a lot of Nigerians emigrating. Also, we're helping the economies of those countries.
Right. Okay.
So if Nigerians are doing that out there, why can't foreigners also do the same way for us?
Well,
so we can take advantage of their presence here.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, we're out of time, but just very briefly, people often give tax breaks to foreigners because they're bringing foreign investment and foreign business into the country. So in a sense, it might be shooting yourself in the foot if you go and start taxing them. I mean,
it's not a tax really. We're not clear, but it's not
Yeah.
going to. It's not, from what I've read, it's not going to be like a tax.
Right.
But
Okay.
maybe some kind of fees,
Right.
And that clarity will come in
the
no
fee
time.
is a
Yes,
tax. I mean,
right.
that's what it
I mean,
is.
when you go to, you know how much you
is.
pay if you want to live in the UK, or if you want to want to work in the UK, for instance. Beyond the fact that you pay taxes, there are other levies.
Well, we're going to have to watch it and see. I don't mean to interrupt you, but we literally are out of time. Professor, thank you very much indeed. Professor Abiodun Adeniyi is a current affairs analyst and professor of communications at Baze University in Abuja. That's it for this edition of Arise Prime Time. Join us again tomorrow from me and the entire team here in Abuja and Lagos. Bye-bye, and thank you for watching.